To the left-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang.
Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. With me, your host, Harry Symeou, and we are bringing you another scouting report today. I've promised you a few of these over the course of the summer, and we'll continue to deliver them as and when we're linked with players credibly. We'll have a look into the ins and outs of those individuals. We'll try and figure out whether or not they are a good fit for our team, for our club. And what I'll do is normally in these, I'll start off by sharing with you my kind of initial thoughts on the player. Then I'll go through all the research that I've done. And then I will tell you if my opinion has slightly changed or remains the same, or if there are things that maybe caught me by surprise, or if there's anything that, you know, I sort of saw with the eye test that I think the research has now kind of backed up and corroborated. So loads and loads to get into. I know today is the day that the Premier League fixtures were announced for the new season. And we'll touch on that very, very briefly right at the top of this episode, just because it is hot news. And I know that people do want to hear a little bit about it. Tough start for the Arsenal. We kick off with a home game against Wolves, but then we travel to Villa away in our second fixture. We then meet Brighton at the Emirates Stadium before back-to-back away trips at Spurs and at Manchester City. I mean, it's not the greatest of starts, but the good thing about that is that we don't have those fixtures to come in the business end of the season like we did last year, where lots of people were writing us off in terms of the title challenge. And look, we took it all the way. But that was mainly to do with the fact that we probably had the much more difficult fixture list. So maybe that's flipped. I haven't looked at Manchester City's in any great detail yet. I haven't looked at Liverpool's or anybody else that we think could potentially be contenders. But yeah, look, it is what it is. You play everybody twice. That's how it works. I'm not going to sit here and get sort of caught up too much on the order of the fixtures. The reason I'm a little bit I don't want to say I'm not excited, because I'm always excited when a new Premier League season comes around. But the reason I just kind of didn't really jump on board with the hype of this being announced this morning is just because everything bloody gets leaked these days. Like, we knew what the fixtures were hours before it came out. And so the buzz of that announcement just gets taken away. And I know I've moaned about this before, but it feels like football's in this really weird space right now where nothing's a surprise. Nothing brings any excitement because everybody bloody knows what's what before it's a thing. And it's just incredibly frustrating. And I know that, you know, I work in the football media industry. And so it probably sounds a bit rich coming from me, but I really do find it frustrating that there is just no surprises anymore, whether that be international squads, whether that be fixture announcements, whether that be transfers. Everything is out there all of the time. There's just so much information to process, which is good on the one hand, but by that same token, I think does take the shine off of some things. Okay, so let's dive into our Amadou Onana scouting report. We'll do that in just a minute. Let's take some of your thoughts, and let's say a few hellos to some of you joining us in the live chat. Big hello to Afsar. We've got Damien Kelly in there as well, who is very excited about the fixture announcement. At least you are. I'm glad you are. I'm glad someone is. Tom says, good morning, Harry and chat. I'd only take a punt on Onana after we signed for Fana. If Partey is sold, he'd take on any spot in the squad and would fight with Jorginho to be the first midfield sub. So you're not convinced he's going to be this transformative signing. I'm not either, and we'll get into why in a minute. Stefan says, don't want Onana. Big hello to Sammy, to Angela. Heavyweight says, well, it seems we're not getting an 8. Well, based on everything I've been reading over the course of the off-season so far, it does feel like Arsenal are leaning towards signing a 6 more than anything else. So you're probably not wrong in that statement in terms of what Arsenal's intentions are at this moment in time. What else have we got? James Bond is not a fan of Onana. Robert says, Onana doesn't do it for me. Can't say Xavi Simons did much, though. I agree. Fofana looks something. Maybe we'll bring you one of these on Fofana a little bit later down the line, if indeed that moves along or there is any further reports about Arsenal's interest. So let's dive into Amadou Onana then, because according to reports, Arsenal are interested in signing the Everton midfielder, but is he the right man? Let's begin by giving you a little bit of background on Amadou Onana, 22-year-old, born in Senegal, but of course represents Belgium, the place where he grew up. Joined Everton from Lille back in August 2022 in a deal that was worth, according to Transfermarkt, 35 million euros. Has a contract that runs until 2027. If you look at his Premier League performances last season, if you look at some of the metrics, some of the numbers, 30 appearances for Sean Dyche's side, who would have survived relegation really comfortably, actually, had it not been for the points deductions that they suffered along the way. Challenging season for them, but was a part of what made them so defensively sound and solid. They kept the second most clean sheets in the Premier League last season, which is pretty remarkable when you think about where they were in the table. He's kind of spent 50% of his time playing as a more central midfield player and then 50% of the time playing as a defensive midfielder for Sean Dyche's side. I think it was 13 games against 14 or something like that in terms of where he was starting. He was only in the starting 11, though, for Everton in the Premier League 61% of the time last season. Now, there were some injuries along the way, nothing really mid to long term that I think you should be concerned about, but he did miss a few games as a result of some knocks. Only played 61% of Everton's total minutes in the Premier League last season, which when you think about the fact that he is a key player to Sean Dyche is a little bit strange, right? That kind of jumped out at me a little bit. In terms of his height and his physical build, well, we can all see it, right? The guy is just under 6'4", very, very dominating, very strong, and looks like he can hold players off, which is always handy in this league of all leagues. And he also falls into that category that we keep talking about when it comes to potential Arsenal targets of being relatively young, just 22 years old, but having quite a bit of experience behind him. 63 Premier League appearances for him to date, and 32 appearances in the French Ligue 1. So he is someone that's been around the block a fair bit considering his age, and obviously that will work in his favor. What does the eye test, though, tell me about Amadou Onana? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you guys what the eye test tells me. Actually, let me put the brakes on a minute. I'm going to tell you what I think or what I thought about Amadou Onana before I did this scouting report. Then I'm going to tell you what the eye test told me. Then I'm going to give you some numbers and some figures that will either back up or completely dispel some of the myths maybe that I've conjured up in my own head. And then I'll give you a conclusion on whether or not I think Amadou Onana is the one that we should be going after this summer. So look, my thoughts going into this were physically very good, gets about the pitch really well, has a lot of raw attributes that could see him molded into a top midfielder someday, but that there's still a lot of work to be done. And if we are to believe the reports that Arsenal are prioritizing a 6 over an 8, the question then becomes, do I think that Amadou Onana can be the 6 in that team? And in my mind, it was always going into this, technically not quite at the level required. Physically, yes, ticks pretty much every box. But is his passing good enough? Is his vision good enough? Is his in-game intelligence on display enough? Is he someone that reads danger really well and early enough to be the guy tasked with marshalling that deep midfield area and protecting the back two? And the answer was, in my head at least, no, not really. Not sophisticated enough of a footballer to be someone that I would look at and say he's absolutely the one. However, you've got to think about the value here as well, right? So if you think about somebody like Declan Rice, for example, we knew from the very off that he was the one. We knew that he was somebody that we needed to get in the door. And although we ended up paying north of £100 million, in my mind, that was, I'm not going to say justified, because I still thought at the time that it was too much money. But over the course of the season, that's been proven to have been justified because he's been able to step up and really take us to that next level. And there's never been any question marks at any point over the course of his first season as to whether Rice was good enough or not, and whether that was a worthwhile signing. The price tag was never spoken about, which says a hell of a lot when you're talking about a £100 million plus player. In Amadou Onana's case, I look at him and I think, probably not the finished article, not the one for me. And again, this is what I was thinking going into doing this. But at 40 to 50 million pounds, maybe it's worth a gamble if you really truly believe as a coach that you can extract more out of him, that you can take his game to the next level. Look, raw attributes are the thing that you can't coach, right? If you've got that, you do great, happy days. If you don't, you don't. Like, you can't make Amadou Onana taller. You can't make him it's a different physical profile to what he was born as. And that's why I look at him and I think some of the boxes are ticked, yes, with Amadou Onana, but is there enough there for you to be able to coach him to a higher and more advanced level? And that was always my reservation going into this. So then what did the eye test tell me about this player? The eye test tells me that Amadou Onana is a very physically imposing individual. I do think that given his size, he probably needs to be encouraged to carry the ball a little bit more, because I think that's a great way of escaping presses. I think that's a great way of escaping problems that he might find in midfield and getting your team up the pitch when you're pinned back. If you've got someone that can carry the ball in the way that Patrick Vieira used to, it gets you out of trouble. Declan Rice does it fantastically well. Now, I'm not comparing Rice or Onana with Patrick Vieira. I'm just looking at that one particular attribute, which I think can be really, really important in the modern game. He seems to be quite confident in possession. Again, this is what the eye test tells me. He seems happy to receive the ball in centre midfield and always looks up quite early, and is more than capable and willing of pinging balls out to that left and right hand side to try and get you on an attack nice and quickly. Quite likes the chipped pass, or the floated pass, depending on how you want to put it. Seems to do those quite frequently from what I've watched. But for somebody of Amadou Onana's size, I'd probably argue that he doesn't protect the ball well enough. I've seen a lot of instances where he's received the ball, and whereas you'd expect someone of his size to kind of use his body really, really well and make it almost impossible for someone to pinch the ball off of him, I do think he can be dispossessed quite easily, which is something that he'll need to improve on. But again, if you've got that raw attribute of the size, then it's kind of a case of just tweaking the way you do things, and that can be rectified with good coaching. And we know we've got great coaches at Arsenal Football Club. Very combative, but I think could have a little bit more bite for someone of his size. Happy to go to ground and make sliding challenges using his long legs and long frame to kind of reach things that you maybe wouldn't expect your average midfielder to, which is great. So you can tell from my kind of eye test assessment that I think he has a lot going for him, but there are still some gaps in Amadou Onana's game. And I think nowadays, if you're talking about someone at a price of £50 million, you're probably always going to find gaps in their game, because in this market, £50 million isn't really that much money. When you think that Declan Rice went for 100, you're kind of paying half price, but you're probably only getting half of the quality at this stage as well. So I'm always mindful of the price when I go into these things and do these things. And, I want to be fair. I don't want to be holding a £50 million player to the same standards as I'd hold a £100 million player. And that's where it can get a little bit messy, can't it? What do some of the metrics and some of the numbers then tell us about Amadou Onana? Because they'll either back up or completely dismiss some of the stuff I've just been saying to you. Let's get into that right after this. Okay, so the reason I held off in recording this is because I wanted to do it after I got to watch him play for Belgium in their game against Slovakia in the European Championships yesterday. And I've spotted this tweet going around, which I really wanted to share with you guys, because in this tweet, I think it paints a far more positive picture of Amadou Onana's performance for Belgium yesterday than what we actually saw. And I think it's important that you're wary of these types of tweets. I'm not digging anybody out. Like, the guy has literally gone and got the statistics and he's just, relayed them. That's fine. But I think you can get caught up in this stuff and you can end up being sucked in and believing that a player is at a much higher level than they actually are. This says 100% of the ground duels won. Correct. And this is in the game against Slovakia last night. It also says 100% of tackles won. It then says 100% of dribbles completed, 80% of his aerial duels won, and 9 out of 10 of his overall duels won, which paints a really, really positive picture. What this doesn't tell you, and what I think is worth highlighting, is that his pass completion rate of 84% to me is not good enough. Not if you're going to come into an Arsenal midfield and be the guy that sets us off from the base. When we push up and press high, as a defensive midfielder at Arsenal, you can't afford to have a low passing accuracy. You can't afford to be someone who doesn't take really, really good care of the ball. Yes, you need to progress it. And sometimes that will mean taking gambles and risks in possession. But you can't be turning up with 84% passing accuracy and expecting me to think that that is amazing, because it's not. He completed one long ball in the game yesterday. And the other thing that this doesn't tell you is that he lost the ball 11 times in that Belgian midfield in that particular fixture. So yes, you can take certain stats and you can pad them out and create a picture that you want to create. But I don't think Amadou Onana's performance for Belgium against Slovakia in their opening game of the European Championships, and he wasn't the only Belgian that underperformed, by the way, but I don't think it was anywhere near good enough for us to be putting out posts like this and then jumping on them and saying, well, he must be the right man for Arsenal then, because, he completed 100% of his dribbles. How many dribbles did he attempt? Not very many, because he won 100% of his ground duels. Fine, that's positive. But there are stuff there are things and there are metrics that have not been included in this that will tell you that he wasn't actually that good for Belgium. And I would argue that the eye test told me that he wasn't actually that good for Belgium. I don't really understand why people are so big on this. If he comes in and we get him for a decent price, of course, I'll give him a chance and we can see how it goes. But nobody's going to convince me right now that Amadou Onana is the solution ready-made today to come in and be our new number 6, particularly if we lose Thomas Partey this summer. Let's take it on to some of the metrics then on FB Ref, which gives us an idea of how he compares to some of his peers. Now, that's why I really like these scouting reports, because they give you that kind of insight. Bear with me a second. What am I looking for? Why isn't it there? The bit that I wanted. More Amadou Onana pages. Oh, there we go. That's why it's being covered by that. Hold on. Okay. So this is over the last 365 days, and he's been compared to positional peers in the men's Big Five leagues, UEFA Champions League and UEFA Europa League. It's based on 2,091 minutes played. Now, these scouting reports are available on fbref.com, but they are powered by Opta. Forget the goals, okay? I'm not going to sit here and pull Amadou Onana apart in terms of goals when he's compared to his peers, because I just don't think that's fair. That's not what I'd be bringing him in the team to do. If you look at assists, though, he is nowhere near some of his peers in that sense. He's only in the 9th percentile for assists. Look, the goal scoring stuff, he's in around about the 63rd percentile for non-penalty goals, which, like, it isn't a disaster, but when you think about the fact that he's being compared against his peers, he's clearly not someone that performs at a high level in comparison to others that play in his position. But anyway, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. And I'm going to move on into some more interesting stuff. Passes attempted. He's in the 40th percentile. Now, either he doesn't play that many passes or he just doesn't get the ball enough. And if you're playing in that 6th position for Arsenal against low blocks, you're going to need to be able to get on the ball quite a bit here. So this one was a bit of a red flag for me. Pass completion. I highlighted that last night against Slovakia for Belgium, his pass completion rate was 84%. And I'd imagine that people listening to that at that time would have said, yeah, that's not great for someone in that position. But you know what? Maybe it was a one-off. Well, actually, it's not a one-off because his average pass completion rate is 84.1%, which puts him in the 57th percentile among his peers. So again, that's not something that jumps out in a positive light to me. I don't look at that and think, well, you know what, the game against Belgium, or for Belgium, I should say, against Slovakia was a one-off, and actually you're pretty good in this metric. You're not. You're not where we need you to be in that. Progressive passes, again, I'd argue that he's nowhere near where we need him to be. Averages 4.61 per game. 48th percentile is where he ranks against his peers. So he's not even in the top 50% in this. Progressive carries, again, he struggles here. He averages less than one progressive carry of the ball per match, which backs up the point that I was saying earlier, where I don't think that he carries the ball enough, given his size, given his stature, given his running power. Successful take-ons, again, is very low, averages just over half of one per game, 41st percentile. Touches, he's nowhere near it in terms of some of his peers, in terms of getting on that ball, which backs up what I was saying earlier about if the passes attempted are low, it's probably because he doesn't get on the ball a lot. And the progressive passes recovery, so his ability to be able to suss out where a progressive pass is coming from and maybe read it early, step into the right position and intercept it, is again something that he doesn't score particularly highly on. Again, he's not in the top 50% on that, and that worries me. Where he does perform quite well is tackles. He's in the 92nd percentile. And again, you've got to factor in the team that he's playing for, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. You're going to probably need to make more tackles playing for Everton than you are for Arsenal. Interceptions, again, not even in the top 50%. Blocks, 39th percentile, averages just over one per game. Clearances, 1.33 per game on average. Aerial duels won, is another place where he stands out and performs quite well. He's in the 94th percentile, and that will be largely down to his height and his ability to compete in those situations. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, a lot of the stuff I told you with the eye test, and a lot of the stuff that I've been saying consistently throughout the summer when talking about Amadou Onana, because we have touched on him before, is backed up in these numbers and in these metrics. So I feel a lot better about my assessment of the player. Now, again, we'll come on to the conclusion in a bit, and I'll share with you my thoughts on this and whether or not this is a worthwhile move. But I just wanted to kind of finish off by looking at, and FB Ref do this fantastic thing on their website where they look at a player's metrics and then they compare them to similar players, in those top five leagues, in the Champions League and Europa League and stuff, as we mentioned a little bit earlier on. And I looked through this list of players, and it's not particularly inspiring. Ederson of Atalanta, who I thought was really, really good this season, is the one player that I'd actually say that him being compared to in this list is a compliment, because I talked a little while ago about Ederson and how he's someone that I'd quite like to see us move for this summer. I think he'd be a good fit. But then you look further down that list, Jefferson Lerma at Crystal Palace. Does that inspire you? He's similar to Martin Zubimendi in some ways, but not completely the same, which probably makes the point more than anything else that Martin Zubimendi's one we should probably be on the fence about as well. And Mario Lemina's on that list as well, of Wolverhampton Wanderers. So, I mean, and I look at that list, it's not very complimentary in terms of the players he's being compared to, with the exception of maybe two on there. And that does worry me a little bit. Let me go over to the comment section and take some of what you guys are saying on this. It's really, really interesting to get you guys' opinions here as well. I know a lot of you will disagree with me, and that's fine. Robert says on Onana, we haven't got the time to take on developing players who need to be starters. Midfield is an absolute priority, and we need players who are going to slot in very quickly and can be a major player. I agree with that. Winning Ways says Onana is not a top-level footballer. He's a mid-table footballer, if you ask me. Hacker says lacks on-pitch intelligence. Why think Arteta can do it, but Dyche can't. James Bond says Onana isn't even half of Rice's quality. He's worse than Bissouma and Højbjerg. I don't know if I'd go that far, but he isn't at the level we need a player to be if he's going to come in and be a starter. The Lonesome Gunner says, as good as Onana is, maybe I think we would need someone who's more disruptive, especially in low block systems. Yeah, agreed. Jid says, why do we buy into stats when it's a fan favorites player? But when it's players we're not sold on, we throw caveats and context, I beg your pardon, to show that the stats are not so reliable. I don't think I'm doing that. Like, I gave you my opinion on Amadou Onana weeks ago when we talked about him on the podcast. And everything that I said in terms of where his strengths and weaknesses lay, I think has been backed up by the statistics. And I don't put the statistics together. I'm just sharing them with you. So, yeah. Jid goes on to say, come on now, those stats are relevant despite the fact that there are other stats that are not included. That literally happens even with your favorite players. And I said when I was talking about that when we're talking about those types of tweets where we're going through a list of stats and only putting the ones in which the player performed, you always have to be wary of them. Of course you do. Of course you do. What else have we got in the live chat? Lots of mixed reaction on this. Some of you leaping to Amadou Onana's defense. Others sort of being quite critical of him. Tom says, just to play devil's advocates, his passing stats are also due to playing in a Sean Dyche Everton team. Not much exciting football to play there. Yeah, and I did say that. I did say that when I was going through them, that, you know, either it's probably because he doesn't get on the ball enough, which can be down partly to him, but partly to the system as well. And yeah, you know, you've got to apply that context, of course. Of course. Let me share with you guys then, just to wrap up, my conclusion on Amadou Onana, and you can let me know what you think in the comment section. So, is Amadou Onana somebody that I would go out and sign this summer? Well, I've got to say I wasn't totally convinced before conducting my little scouting mission, and I'm certainly not totally convinced now. Not a great deal has changed for me on this. I think there are strengths there. They're clear to see. Aerial ability to get involved in tackles, size, physical profile, all of those things are, you know, Amadou Onana has going for him. But I don't see enough on the technical side to justify him being my primary target in that sixth position moving forward. If I'm going to compare him to the guy that would play there now if he's fit, which will probably be Thomas Partey, because we think that Declan Rice is going to play in this slightly more advanced role, then they're worlds apart. You know, Onana is younger, fitter, stronger, probably covers more distance nowadays, gets around, etc., wins more aerial duels and ground duels, perhaps, yes. But on a technical level, he's nowhere near Thomas Partey. And the reason that we missed Thomas Partey so much last season, and the reason that we will talk about him as being so important to this team, is not just what he gives you off the ball, it's what he gives you on the ball and his superiority to so many of his peers. You know what? Just for the sake, I haven't done this, you know, before recording this, so I'm doing this off the cuff. But if I look at Thomas Partey, and I compare the stats on FB Ref when I'm talking about the on the ball stuff, you're going to see that they're worlds apart. Hold on a minute. Let me bring this up while we're live. Now, while I'm just quickly doing that, remember, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. It really, really does help us. Subscribe to the channel if you are brand spanking new. That also really, really does help. And if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review. It really, really does help. Okay, look. If we look at Thomas Partey's page, okay, so hold on. Let me remind you of how it looked for Onana. So in the kind of on the ball section, right? If we go back to Amadou Onana, we're looking at someone who's in the 40th percentile for passes attempted. I appreciate passes attempted is going to be skewed by the team that you play for, of course, but pass completion shouldn't be. And progressive passes, progressive carries, successful take-ons, okay, will be skewed somewhat by that, but you have to look at those in a little bit more detail, I think. So look at those metrics, okay? 40th percentile for passes attempted, 57th percentile for pass completion. Now flick over to Thomas Partey. Pass completion rate is pretty much 90%. Passes attempted is much higher, but again, I'll put that down to the team. Look at the number of progressive carries. Look at the number of successful take-ons. Thomas Partey is so far ahead of him in the on-the-ball stuff. It's unbelievable. Now, he's not ranking as highly when it comes to off the ball stuff, tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, etc., etc. But Amadou Onana does the tackles and the aerial duels really, really well, but he's playing in a team where he has less of the ball, and that's probably required more. The point I'm trying to make is that if you want to compare them physically, I think you can do that, and that's fair. And I think you can look at, Amadou Onana and be fair and say he can do all of those things. Physically, he's great, but on the ball, he doesn't rank anywhere near the likes of Thomas Partey. And so, how can you confidently say that today he's ready to be that replacement? At £50 million, maybe Arsenal would think it's worth a gamble. Maybe Arsenal would think it's worth rolling the dice on Amadou Onana. But me, I'm not convinced that he's the one for us, and I wouldn't be going out to sign him this summer. That's my conclusion on the matter. Look, if you've got any questions, any thoughts, leave them in the comment section after we finish the live stream, and we'll pick some of them up on the next episode. Really, really looking forward to bringing you that very, very soon. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Amadou Onana. In conclusion, not the one for me. Wouldn't go and spend north of £50 million on him. I think there are better options out there. And I think that Arsenal need to be casting the net a lot wider if they're looking to find that new number 6, the guy that can be the new Thomas Partey, hopefully without the injury problems. Amadou Onana isn't that for me. Decent player. Not quite sure he is Arsenal level, though. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on the Scouting Report episode. We had amazing feedback for the Benjamin Sesko one that we did earlier on in the summer. Hope you've enjoyed this one too. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you all on the next episode. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great Tuesday. And if you're watching the Euros, enjoy the football. All the best. Goodbye.